We didn't want to just be supporting missionaries that would come to Mexico. That's what I did for also 7 years before she came into Mexico. But we decided that we wanted to be part of the effort of missions directly. So we went to the training, and then people in the training said the first year we were there, you know what, we like you a lot, which I knew that was bad news when they started like that. And they said, we like you a lot, but the next year you are going to be the only student. And even though we like you a lot, we cannot keep the whole school open just for you. And then they say, since we're going to do that, we're going to redo the whole training. So if you want to come next year, you're going to have to start over again. And sorry. I'm like, okay, Lord, well, thank you. And so I look at my wife. We prayed a lot about this. We talked to a lot of people, and we decided, you know what? If we're going to have to redo the whole training anyway, why don't go to the States and take the training in Missouri? And so that's what we did in the past 2 years. I finished the training in August. And after we finished that, what we have been doing is doing a lot of partnership development. We have been all over the place in Florida, Oregon, Virginia, and all over the place. Google said that last year we went around the world 1.5 times. So we've been all over the place. Actually, also this week, so that we'll be able to come and go free, we're going to apply for my citizenship, and then all the members in our family are going to be dual citizens. And that's going to be great, because we're going to be able to not worry about that and not pay the extra fees every year that come with that. And that's what we have been doing. And why are we doing all of this? Why are we getting trained? What's going on? What's the purpose of all of this? Well, let me tell you a little bit about Mexico and what things look like in there. We work amongst unreached people groups. It's estimated that there is around 2,500 unreached people groups. And we work in their language. We don't use translators. We make relationships with the people. We take the time to learn the language, the culture, the way they think, and then we teach that way. So then after that, we present foundational Bible teaching, which means we start from the beginning, from Genesis, which, yes, is a very exciting book, because everything that comes afterwards hangs on what happens in Genesis. So we start in there. And then from there, through the Old Testament and through all the promises of God, we teach until Jesus comes, and then about his death and resurrection. We don't start with the ministry of Jesus. We start with the promise of God to Adam and Eve. And we start with creation. And then, most important, we establish mature churches. We're not planning to be there in that ministry for forever. Our goal is that the church will sustain itself, that elders will come from amongst the tribal people, that believers will come to maturity, and we'll be able to hand the church to them. That is our goal. Our goal is to work ourselves out of our job. And that's the way we do things. So, let me ask you this. What do you think when you think of Mexico? Well, if you have watched the news recently, I have a good idea what you think when you think about Mexico. And let me tell you something. A lot of people, when they think about Mexico, they think about people like me, right? Because I'm a Mexican. So they think like... I don't know what happened. I can hear me now. Was that how loud I was? Are they telling me, dude, calm down, you were too loud? Okay, thanks, Brett. Okay, so when you go to Mexico, and When you look at Mexico and you think about people, you think about people like me. But what if I told you that in Mexico there are over 8 million people that do not speak Spanish at all as their first language, and barely as a trade language? There are around 283 other languages and dialects in Mexico that have nothing to do with Spanish, which means I couldn't talk to them, Amy couldn't talk to them, and they couldn't talk amongst themselves. That's how different these dialects and languages are. And so when you think about Mexico, I want you to think about it this way, not just in the sense of, Spanish and Spanish ministries, but these guys, 283 other languages and dialects in Mexico. And that's what Amy and I are hoping to go and do. Now I'm gone. Okay. I don't know. I'll just keep going. So right now, these are the travel works that we have in Mexico. We have works with the Triqui people, Northern Tarahumara, Guarijillo, Northern Tepehuan, Nahuatl, and Cora. And again, to give you an idea what the people are like, this is examples: Triqui people, Tarahumara people, Tepehuan people, Nahuatl people. See, very different from what I would look like. I grew up in Chihuahua. That's a city that's around 2 million people. Very urban. We have an IHOP. We have a Lowe's. We have a Home Depot. We have things like that. But again, there is a lot of remote locations. The Cora people. And so in seeing that and seeing the need, it's important to assess what the needs are and where the gospel has been. See, when I look at you guys, I am sure you have access to the Bible. You have access to the gospel in your own language. We just heard it very clearly, clear as day. You have access to all of these things. You have the freedom to choose if you want to follow God or not. And you have all these things. You have a healthy church that can help you grow and walk with God. And so when we look at these groups, it's important to ask the same questions. Do they have access to the gospel? Do they have a Bible in their own language? And so in order to do that, a group from our agency went to, there it is, Oaxaca and Chiapas, because we're looking into expanding over there. And they went there with these questions in mind. Do people in Oaxaca and Chiapas from those people groups have access to the gospel? And this is what they found. Okay, so you see very urban setting, some big towns, some smaller towns, some church-like kind of buildings. That's what they found. But then, as they went under the surface and they asked people, so what are you doing in ministry? They're saying, well, you know what? We do ministry in Spanish, but nobody is really reaching to all the people. There is like hundreds of people groups in this very small area. Well, not hundreds, but certainly dozens of people groups in this small area. And they're like, well, we are sort of having services in Spanish, and they sort of come, but then they talk to these people, and they wouldn't understand the message. To make that clear for you, my cousin tells this story where missionaries would come to Baja California and they would use a translator. And he was working amongst the Triqui people, all right? And then one day after church, he sees this lady, and there is this nice rocky road where you can walk, and she was walking like by the ravine over in the edge, right? And so my cousin asks her, like, why are you doing that? And she says, well, it's because the preacher said that the road to salvation is narrow. And I figure, you know what? I'm going to walk over here, and then I'll be saved. And so it only takes very little effort to ask them and go under the surface and realize these people are not understanding grace. They're not understanding the gospel. And that is very clear. And the problem is that nobody's doing it in their language. Nobody's doing it in their culture. So it's just flying over. And that's what they found also in Oaxaca and Chiapas and all of these places. You can see very urban settings, but again, the gospel has not reached to these people. They have a lot of religious buildings. They have interesting, like cemeteries, just in the like little plazas, like you would have a public park. They would have cemeteries all over the place, and they have a lot of fear. They have a lot of fear of the spirits of one another. There's just a lot of distrust in general, and this is the climate they live on. And the church is there, but it's just not getting to them at all. And so I asked Tom specifically, Tom, what is the message that these people are believing? And he sent me this picture, being funny, you know. And this thing says, Ataqua Dei is the key to happiness. I'm like, okay, they seem to have the light. They seem to be in the right track. And, you know, Tom, being silly as he is, he sent me a bunch of pictures. And now it's audience participation time. I have a couple questions for you guys. Why do you think it's in that soup? Yeah, in the soup. Cabbage? That is a lobster, very common plate over there. It says you can get a bowl of caldo de langosta. It's like it'd be like 50 cents, something like that. It's very common in that area. Now, here's the question: what is the name in the menu of this thing? How would you say? That's ribs, yes. That is rib pizza. That's what they call it. And it's like, okay, right. Now, look at this picture and tell me, breakfast, lunch, or dinner? The answer is yes. They had this all day long, like McDonald's. All day long, baby. Okay. What are those green things at the top of that thing? Chilies. All right. That is cactus. It's very good. You have to boil it because it's kind of slimy if you eat it like that. But when you boil it and you put it on top of things, it's pretty good. Come to Mexico and I'll show you. Okay. Now, for those guys, accident or on purpose? What would you say? On purpose, yes. That's basically a fried tortilla, and then you put cinnamon and sugar on it, buñuelos. I'm sure you have heard of this, and they're so crispy and so good, and it's getting close to lunchtime, so I'll move on. What do you think those are? Okay. Do you want to ask what those things are? Those are pork guts. They're very good. Very, very good. Listen, when you come to Mexico, you don't have to eat them, but I will, because I like them. All right. And then, did he forget to floss? Or is that a snack? And what is it? Yep. That is a cricket. It's a marinated cricket, and then they dry it out, and it's very common. It's like popcorn in here. It's really, really good. So, you look at all of this, and you notice all the differences. The food is different. The culture is different. The language is different. So, you really have to take the time to get to know the people. And so, what does that look like, getting to know people in the specific works where we're at, let me show you the Tepehuan people. The Tepehuan is a tribal group that is in between Chihuahua and Sinaloa and Sonora. That's what that looks like. That's Chris Thomas. And that was his last youth group. Here's the thing. For many years, Chris struggled because he couldn't find any adults that would come and help him with learning the language. They were all either in the drug trade or dead. And he was very discouraged about this. And they were praying about it and thinking about it. And then all the kids that didn't have a parent, that didn't have barely any uncles, they would come and see Chris as a dad. And he felt like, you know what? God is obviously asking me to pastor these kids and to guide them and help them grow. And it started with, it started with like 5, 6, 7 kids. And last Christmas, he had like 200 kids. And it's interesting. When I see this picture all the time, I see they're sitting down and listening. I'm like, man, I have 3 kids, and I can barely do it. This is clearly a work of the Lord, that they're all sitting down and paying attention. That's supernatural stuff right there. So from there into that. And praise the Lord, because it's not the way he was thinking it was going to go, but it's what God is doing. And interestingly enough, okay, I skipped. Okay, you can see it. So he lives in this huge town of Baborigame, which is like 200 people. And he's like, okay, we're in the metropolis, but actually, because of our ministry with the Tepehuan kids over here in the red dot in a place called Palos Muertos are inviting us to work. Palos Muertos would translate to dead sticks. So, sounds like a great place. Right? And he's like, listen, you need to pray about this. You need to consider it, because we would like you to come, and we would like to be your in-town support co-workers, and we would like you to consider going to Palos Muertos. I'm like, okay, we'll talk about it, and we actually like the idea. But then he sends me this picture, right? And he's like, hey, do you like that house? I'm like, is that a house? Okay. And he's like, well, I was visiting some of the kids of our ministry, and a guy came and he said, when are you going to move in? And the guy said, hey, we have this plot of land and we have a house in there, and we want you to come and do ministry amongst us. And Chris is like, okay, let me tell my friend. And he took this picture. And he's like, I don't know what happened, dude. He shook my hand, and now this is your house. I'm like, Chris, I think you've been in the mountains a little too long. But people in Palos Muertos are open to us and our ministry because of what he's doing with the kids, and they're actually inviting us to be part of this ministry. The security team and the leadership team, it's meeting with them actually this coming week to talk about it and to see what it's going to take and what it's going to look like. So if you can remember it this next week, you can be praying about that it will be feasible, that all the obstacles will be overcome. And we are really praying. We are not 100% sure that this is where we will end up, but we want to work with them. And this is an example of the not Spanish that I'm going to be speaking. It's going to be like, gubu karikadu, kudu. And it's a thing that happens in the back of your throat, where all your T's, all your G's are kind of hijacked by your tongue. I cannot do it. I can barely describe it. And Chris laughs at me every time I try. But it's like, diuxi gu ogadana. Diuxi maradu umadu. Diuxi ibadu. And Chris will be like, oh, dude, stop. Just stop. Okay, so he's not here, so I can show you. And interestingly enough, there is now adults and males that are like, okay, you need a language helper. I can help you. What do you need? And that is a huge answer to prayer. So, again, how do we fit in this big picture? As you can see, all that stuff with the Tepehuan, all the stuff with the survey trips, it's something that God is doing, and we have no part on it yet. What we're doing is simply going back to Mexico and joining what God is already doing over there. So, how do we fit on that, which God is doing? Well, we're going to have 2 weeks of orientation. Usually when you go to Mexico, you take 2 years of orientation because you are from Florida and you don't know the language, but I know the language. My whole family is from there, and I know the culture. So 2 weeks, they said, for me, just so that you eat a lot of tacos in that time. And then we're going to have, I'm like, okay, if the leadership wants that, so be it. And so we're going to have 2 weeks of finding a house in the city and figuring out life. You know, when you move to a new place, you usually take time, even if you know the language and the culture. And then after that, we're going to have 6 months to a year of special projects. We're going to probably join what the Carltons and that survey people did, and we're going to be traveling and assessing for a little bit where the church is at and what the edge of the church is and where can we put more missionaries, what places are open and what places have the need. And I'll have the privilege of being part of that effort. And so it's going to be great. But they said, and they were very specific about this, it's going to be 6 months, tops a year, because we want you on a tribe. And that is our end goal, that we will be part of a tribal people group and that will be doing ministry amongst a people group. In that time, the 6 months to a year, we'll also have meetings with possible coworkers, people that are about to finish their Spanish, or local people, you know, other Mexican missionary families that want to go and work with us. So we'll probably look into that, and we'll choose a location. The only reason why I'm not telling Chris, hey, I'll be there tomorrow, well, not because I have to finish raising support and, you know, and apply for citizenship, but the only reason why we're not sure that we're going to be there yet is because we know that, hey, I'm going to be spending time in Oaxaca and Chiapas, and I don't know what the Lord has for me over there. We don't know what we're going to see. Maybe the Lord is going to challenge me someplace else. And so we just want to be wise, and we want to hear directly from the Lord where He's going to have us serve. And so we're going to be doing people groups assessments. We're going to look at the tribal works over there. And then after that, we'll be part of a people group. So how do you guys fit on this big picture? You can be a part of our team. You can be our prayer partners. We need a lot of prayer. And it's not easy to do this. It's not simple. We cannot do it by ourselves. You can support us financially. We're now at 53% of our recommended support. And if you want to be partnering with us in that, we can tell you more about that later. You can come and see by yourself what we're doing in Mexico, what life is like. You can come and eat with us, and you can stay with us. We can show you the tribal works. I know I talk a lot about food because that's close to my heart, but trust me, there is more to see and more things to do. You can come and see. A lot of missionaries have their families come, their people from their church come, people not from their church come. We have the advantage that we're in Mexico, so you can literally drive over there. It takes a long time, but you can drive over there. And so that makes things a lot simpler if you guys would like to come and see what it's like. So, again, we're at about 53% of our recommended support, and that's our recommended amount right there. And that's how much more we need every month to do this ministry. And my wife is holding prayer cards like this. We have prayer cards in the back, if you want to take them and pray for us. You can also sign up for our newsletter if you want, and just keep track of what we're doing in Mexico and where we're at and what's happening over there. And thank you. Thank you for taking the time this morning to listen to us.